Omar Rashid thought he had buried his past 20 years ago when he walked away from the only woman he had ever truly loved. Now, as he sits in the boardroom of his own company, staring at the acquisition documents that will change everything, he realizes that some ghosts refuse to stay buried. The woman across the table isn't just any investor, she's Kemi Adebayo, his former wife, the mother of the child he abandoned, and now the new majority shareholder of Rashid Industries. What she's about to reveal will shatter everything he thought he knew about the life he left behind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Omar Rashid adjusted his platinum cufflinks as he gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office in Riyadh. The sprawling cityscape stretched endlessly before him, a testament to Saudi Arabia's rapid transformation and his own meteoric rise in the business world. At 45, he was one of the youngest CEOs to helm a multinational corporation, his name synonymous with success in the oil and renewable energy sectors. But success, Omar had learned, was a double-edged sword. His phone buzzed with another message from his father, Halil Rashid, the patriarch of one of Saudi Arabia's most influential families. The text was brief but loaded with expectation. The Al-Mansuri meeting is confirmed for Thursday. Yasmin's father is eager to discuss the engagement. Omar's jaw tightened. Even at his age, even with his achievements, his family still treated him like a chess piece in their grand strategy of maintaining social status and business alliances. The proposed marriage to Yasmin Al-Mansuri wasn't about love, it was about merging two powerful dynasties, consolidating wealth, and preserving what his father called the natural order of things. He had tried to explain to his father countless times that he wasn't interested in arranged marriages, that he wanted to choose his own path. But Halil Rashid was a man who believed tradition trumped personal desires, and Omar's resistance only strengthened his father's resolve. The irony wasn't lost on Omar. 20 years ago, he had chosen tradition over his heart, and it had cost him everything that truly mattered. Now his father was asking him to make the same choice again. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Rashid, your 3 p.m. appointment is here." "Send them in," Omar replied, straightening his tie and forcing his mind back to business. He had learned long ago that work was the most effective way to silence the voices from his past. But as he turned from the window, a memory flashed unbidden through his mind. Cambridge University, 1999. He was 25, pursuing his MBA, and the world felt full of possibilities. That was where he met her. Kemi Adebayo, a brilliant Nigerian woman studying international development. She had walked into his economics class 3 weeks late, her natural hair framed by a colorful head wrap, and Omar had felt something shift inside him that he couldn't name. Unlike the women in his social circle back home, Kemi didn't defer to him or treat him like a prize to be won. She challenged his ideas, questioned his assumptions, and made him think about perspectives he had never considered. When she argued passionately about economic inequality during a heated classroom debate, her eyes blazing with conviction, Omar realized he was witnessing something rare. Someone who cared more about being right than being liked. Their friendship had developed slowly. Study sessions in the library that stretched long into the night. Conversations over coffee that ranged from global politics to childhood dreams. Omar found himself sharing things with Kemi that he had never told anyone, his frustration with his family's expectations, his uncertainty about his future, his fear that he might never be more than his father's son. "You know what your problem is?" Kemi had said one evening as they walked along the River Cam, the ancient university buildings glowing golden in the sunset. "You think you have to choose between disappointing your family and disappointing yourself. But what if there's a third option, which is living authentically and letting the chips fall where they may? Your family might surprise you. And if they don't, at least you'll know you didn't compromise your soul for their approval. It was the kind of idealistic advice that only someone who had never lived under the weight of generational expectations could give. But coming from Kemi, it didn't sound naive, it sounded brave. Their relationship had evolved naturally from friendship to something deeper. Omar remembered the exact moment he knew he was in love with her. They were in his small flat near campus, working on a joint presentation about sustainable development in emerging markets. Kemi was explaining her vision for how technology could leapfrog traditional infrastructure in rural Africa, her hands moving expressively as she spoke, her face animated with passion and possibility. "You could help make this happen, Omar," she had said, turning to face him. "With your family's resources and connections, imagine the impact we could have together." The word "together" had hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither of them had yet acknowledged. Omar had reached out and touched her face, marveling at how right it felt, how natural. "Is that what you want?" he had asked quietly. "To build something together?" Her answer had been a kiss that changed everything. For 2 years they had built a life that felt both thrilling and terrifying in its authenticity. Omar had never been happier, but he had also never been more aware of the growing chasm between his life in Cambridge and the expectations waiting for him back home. Every phone call from his father felt like a reminder of a debt he couldn't repay. Every family gathering he missed prompted increasingly stern lectures about duty and responsibility. Kemi had tried to understand, but how could she? She came from a family that, while not wealthy, had always encouraged her to pursue her dreams. Her parents, both professors at the University of Lagos, had sacrificed to send her to Cambridge because they believed in her potential. The idea that success could be a burden, that love could be a liability, was foreign to her worldview. "When are you going to tell them about me?" she had asked one evening during their final year. They were planning their future together. Kemi had received a job offer from a development organization in Geneva, and Omar was considering turning down his father's expectation that he return immediately to Saudi Arabia. Soon, Omar had promised, but even as he said it, he felt the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on him. That choice had become unavoidable the night Kemi told him she was pregnant. Omar shook his head, forcing himself back to the present. The 3 p.m. appointment was a routine budget review, but his mind kept drifting to that pivotal moment 20 years ago when his entire life had balanced on the edge of a decision that would haunt him forever. He had been a coward then, choosing the familiar cage of family expectations over the uncertain freedom of love. And now, as he prepared for another arranged marriage, another surrender to tradition, he couldn't shake the feeling that his past was about to collide with his present in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. What Omar didn't know was that 3 time zones away, in a sleek office building in Geneva, Kemi Adebayo was putting the finishing touches on a business plan that would bring their worlds crashing together once again. She had spent 20 years building something extraordinary, and now she was ready to show Omar Rashid exactly what he had walked away from and what it was going to cost him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The news had come on a rainy Tuesday evening in March 2000. Omar was in his Cambridge flat, reviewing case studies for his final semester when Kemi knocked on his door. He knew immediately that something was different. Her usual confident stride was replaced by hesitant steps, and her hands trembled slightly as she set down her bag. "We need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Omar's heart began to race. In all the time he had known Kemi, she had never looked so vulnerable, so uncertain. She was the woman who had stood up to professors twice her age, who had challenged World Bank representatives during guest lectures, who had never backed down from a fight she believed in. But now she looked like she might shatter at any moment. "What's wrong?" he asked, guiding her to the small couch by the window. Kemi took a shaky breath and reached into her purse, pulling out a small white stick. Omar's world tilted on its axis. As he recognized what it was, a pregnancy test with 2 unmistakable pink lines. "I'm pregnant, Omar." The words hit him like a physical blow. Not because he didn't want children with Kemi in his dreams of their future together. He had imagined a family, a life built on love and mutual respect. But the timing, the circumstances, the impossible complexity of his situation back home crashed down on him all at once. "How long have you known?" he managed to ask. "Since yesterday. I took 3 tests to be sure." Her voice was steadier now, but he could see the fear lurking behind her brave facade. "I know this isn't what we planned, but Omar, we can make this work. We love each other. We're both graduating. Soon we have job prospects. We can." "My father," Omar interrupted, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Oh God, my father will kill me." Kemi's expression shifted, hurt flashing across her features. "Your father? That's the first thing you think about." Omar ran his hands through his hair, panic rising in his chest. "You don't understand, Kemi. My family, our culture, the expectations, this changes everything. This is our child, Omar, our baby. How does that change who we are?" But Omar was already spiraling into the catastrophic thinking that had plagued him whenever he tried to imagine bringing Kemi home to Saudi Arabia. His father's voice echoed in his mind, years of conditioning about duty, honor, and family reputation. The weight of being the eldest son, the heir to the Rashid Empire, pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. "I need some air," he said, abruptly, standing up and pacing to the window. "Omar, look at me," Kemi said firmly. When he turned, she was standing too, her chin lifted in that defiant way he had fallen in love with. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family. I'm telling you that we're going to be parents, and we need to figure out how to move forward together." The word "together" should have been a comfort, but all Omar could think about was his father's latest phone call 3 days earlier. Halil Rashid had been more insistent than ever about Omar's return to Saudi Arabia after graduation. There was talk of a merger with another prominent family's business empire, and Omar's role in cementing that partnership through marriage to their daughter. "They've already chosen someone for me," Omar said quietly, the words feeling like poison on his tongue. Kemi went very still. "What? My father? He's been arranging a marriage for when I return home. It's been in the works for months." Omar couldn't look at her as he spoke. "I kept thinking I could find a way out of it, that I could convince him to let me make my own choices, but now ... Now what? Now that I'm pregnant, you suddenly remember you have other obligations?" Kemi's voice was rising, anger replacing the vulnerability from moments before. "It's not like that. Then what is it like, Omar? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're looking for an excuse to run back to your comfortable, predetermined life." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Omar had always known that his relationship with Kemi existed in a bubble, separate from the reality waiting for him back home. He had allowed himself to believe that love would somehow be enough to overcome the cultural and familial barriers that stood between them. But now, faced with the concrete reality of a pregnancy, the impossibility of the situation felt overwhelming. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said desperately. "If I defy my father, if I bring home a woman who isn't what, Omar? Who isn't Arab? Who isn't chosen by your family? Say it." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Omar wanted to tell her she was wrong, that her race and nationality didn't matter to him, that he would fight anyone who suggested otherwise. But he also knew that his family's acceptance wasn't just about personal preference. It was about maintaining social standing, business relationships, and a way of life that had been passed down for generations. "This is about more than just us," he said finally. "No, Omar, This is about exactly us. This is about whether you love me enough to fight for us, or whether you love your family's approval more. The ultimatum hung in the air between them. Omar felt trapped, pulled in two directions by forces that seemed equally powerful and mutually exclusive. On one side was Kemi, carrying his child, representing a future built on love and authenticity. On the other was his family, his culture, his identity as the son and heir of Omar Rashid. "I need time to think," he said. Kemi's face crumpled. "Time to think about what?" "About whether your own child is worth fighting for." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Kemi laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about fair? I'm the one who's pregnant, Omar. I'm the one whose body is changing, whose life is about to be turned upside down. I'm the one who's going to have to explain to my family, my friends, my future employers, why I'm having a baby with a man who can't even decide if he wants to be a father." Omar flinched at the harsh truth of her words. "Kemi, please. I just need to figure out how to handle this with my family. Maybe if I approach it the right way, if I explain what? That you accidentally fell in love with someone they didn't choose for you? That you accidentally got her pregnant?" Kemi shook her head. "Your family doesn't want explanations, Omar. They want compliance." The conversation continued late into the night, going in circles as both of them tried to find a solution that didn't exist. Omar wanted to be the man Kemi needed him to be, but he also couldn't shake the terror of losing everything he had been raised to value. Kemi wanted to believe that love could conquer the practical realities they faced, but she was also beginning to see the depth of Omar's internal conflict. By the time she left his flat that night, nothing had been resolved. Omar watched from his window as she walked away, her shoulders squared with determination, even as he could see the defeat in her stride. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and tried to imagine a future where he could have both Kemi and his child, and his family's acceptance. But deep down, he already knew that no such future existed. The next morning, Omar received a phone call that would seal his fate. His father's voice was unusually warm as he shared the news that the Al-Manzari family had formally agreed to the marriage proposal. The wedding would take place in the fall, after Omar's graduation, and return to Saudi Arabia. "Your mother is so pleased," Halil said. "She's already begun planning the celebration. This union will secure our family's position for generations to come." Omar listened to his father's excitement and felt something die inside him. When he hung up the phone, he sat in his empty flat and tried to imagine telling Kemi that he was going to marry another woman, that their child would grow up knowing their father had chosen duty over love. He never made that call. Instead, over the following weeks, Omar began to withdraw. He stopped returning Kemi's messages, avoided the places he knew she would be, and threw himself into his studies with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He told himself he was buying time, figuring out a plan, finding a way to make everything work. But what he was really doing was running. The cowardice of it ate at him every day. He would see Kemi across the campus quad and feel his heart break a little more. He would start to dial her number a dozen times a day, only to hang up before the call connected. He wrote letters he never sent, rehearsed conversations he never had, and made promises to himself that he never kept. By the time graduation arrived, Omar had made his choice through inaction. He would return to Saudi Arabia, fulfill his obligations to his family, and try to forget that he had ever been brave enough to love someone completely. What he didn't know was that Kemi had made a choice too. And 20 years later, when their paths crossed again, he would discover just how much that choice had cost both of them. Geneva, Switzerland, June 2000. Kemi Adebayo stood in the sterile waiting room of the University Hospital of Geneva, her hands protectively cradling her growing belly. At 4 months pregnant, she could no longer hide the changes in her body, though she had tried desperately to maintain some semblance of normalcy as her world crumbled around her. It had been 2 months since Omar had effectively vanished from her life. 2 months of unanswered calls, ignored emails, and the crushing realization that the man she had planned to spend her life with had chosen to disappear rather than face their reality together. The job offer from the International Development Organization had felt like a lifeline when it arrived, a chance to start fresh in a new country, away from the painful memories of Cambridge and the ghost of a love that had proven to be built on sand. But now, sitting alone in a foreign hospital, preparing for her first prenatal appointment without the father of her child, the weight of her isolation felt almost unbearable. Kemi Adebayo? A nurse called her name, and she rose on unsteady legs, following the woman down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and broken dreams. Dr. Sarah Muller was a kind woman in her 50s, with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a manner that immediately put Kemi at ease. As she performed the ultrasound, her face lit up with genuine excitement. "Oh my," she said, adjusting the screen so Kemi could see better. "It looks like you're carrying twins." Kemi's breath caught in her throat. On the grainy monitor, she could make out two distinct forms, two tiny heartbeats flickering like stars in the darkness. Twins. She was going to have twins. "Are they ... Are they healthy?" she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "From what I can see, they appear to be developing beautifully. You're approximately 18 weeks along. Have you been taking your prenatal vitamins?" Kemi nodded, unable to speak. The reality of her situation hit her with renewed force. She wasn't just carrying one child that Omar had abandoned, she was carrying two. Two babies who would never know their father, who would grow up hearing only Kemi's side of a story she wasn't even sure she understood herself. Dr. Muller handed her tissues and sat down beside the examination table. "I notice your file doesn't list an emergency contact other than yourself. Do you have family or friends here in Geneva?" The question exposed the full extent of Kemi's isolation. Her parents back in Lagos had been supportive when she called to tell them about the pregnancy, but they were thousands of miles away. Her few friends from Cambridge had scattered to the winds after graduation, pursuing their own dreams in different corners of the world. She was truly alone. "It's just me," Kemi admitted quietly. Dr. Muller's expression softened with understanding. "Well then, we'll make sure you have all the support you need here. There are excellent resources for single mothers in Geneva, and I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey." But as Kemi walked out of the hospital that afternoon, the ultrasound photos clutched in her hand, she had never felt more alone in her life. The bustling streets of Geneva swirled around her, couples holding hands, families with children, business people hurrying to important meetings, and she felt like a ghost moving through a world that no longer had room for her. That evening, in her small studio apartment overlooking Lake Geneva, Kemi sat at her laptop and did something she had promised herself she wouldn't do. She searched for Omar online. What she found made her stomach turn. There, splashed across the society pages of several Middle Eastern publications, were photos from Omar's engagement party. He looked handsome and composed in his traditional white thobe, standing beside a beautiful woman in an ornate gold dress. Yasmin al-Mansouri, according to the caption, daughter of prominent Saudi businessman Fahad al-Mansouri. The merger between the Rashid and al-Mansouri families was being hailed as one of the most significant business alliances of the year. Omar's smile in the photos looked practiced, professional. Not the genuine, joyful expression she remembered from their time together. But he was there, moving forward with his life as if their 2 years together had been nothing more than a brief detour. Kemi slammed the laptop shut and pulled her knees to her chest, sobbing until her body shook with exhaustion. How could he have moved on so easily? How could he stand there, celebrating his engagement to another woman, while she carried his children alone in a foreign country? The anger that followed was cleansing and terrible. She had spent weeks making excuses for Omar, trying to understand the pressure he was under, believing that somewhere deep down he was struggling with the same pain she felt. But these photos told a different story. They told the story of a man who had made his choice and moved on without looking back. That night, Kemi made a promise to herself and to the babies growing inside her. She would never again waste a moment of her life waiting for Omar Rashid to become the man she had thought he was. She would build something extraordinary from the ashes of her broken heart, and she would make sure her children never felt the abandonment she was experiencing. The next morning, Kemi threw herself into her new job with an intensity that surprised her colleagues. The International Development Organization was working on sustainable energy projects across Africa, and Kemi's passion for the work became legendary within the organization. She traveled extensively during her pregnancy, visiting wind farms in Morocco, solar installations in Kenya, and hydroelectric projects in Ghana. Her supervisor, Dr. James Morrison, was initially concerned about her travel schedule, but Kemi's results spoke for themselves. She had an intuitive understanding of the challenges facing developing nations, and her ability to bridge cultural gaps made her invaluable in negotiations with local governments and international investors. "You have a gift," Dr. Morrison told her one afternoon as they reviewed proposals for a new solar initiative in Nigeria. "You see possibilities where others see obstacles." Kemi smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. "Maybe it's because I understand what it means to start from nothing and build something meaningful." As her due date approached, Kemi made another decision that would shape the course of her life. She would take her maternity leave, but she wouldn't return to her position as a project coordinator. Instead, she would use her contacts, her knowledge, and her burning desire to prove herself to start her own consulting firm. The twins, Zara and Quaim, were born on a snowy February morning in 2001. Kemi held them in her arms and felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. They were perfect, beautiful, and entirely hers. Zara had Omar's nose and strong jawline, while Quaim had inherited his father's thick black hair. But their eyes, bright, intelligent, full of possibility, those were all Kemi's. "We're going to build something amazing together," she whispered to them as snow fell outside the hospital window. "Something your father will never be able to take away from us." The early years were brutal. Kemi worked from her apartment while caring for infant twins, surviving on determination and an endless supply of coffee. She freelanced for development organizations, wrote policy papers, and slowly built a reputation as someone who could navigate the complex intersection of business and social impact. Her breakthrough came when she was approached by a consortium of European investors looking to fund renewable energy projects in sub-Saharan Africa. They needed someone who understood both the technical aspects of the projects and the cultural dynamics of the regions they were targeting. Kemi's proposal was so comprehensive, so insightful, that they not only hired her, they offered to back her own investment fund. Adebayo Green Energy Solutions was born in 2005, with Kemi as the sole proprietor and CEO. What started as a small consulting firm quickly grew into one of Europe's most respected sustainable energy investment companies. Kemi had an uncanny ability to identify promising projects before her competitors, and her reputation for integrity made her a trusted partner across the industry. By the time Zara and Quaim were in primary school, Kemi had transformed herself from an abandoned single mother into a force to be reckoned with in the international business world. She spoke at conferences, advised governments, and built partnerships that bridged continents. But success came with its own challenges. The children asked about their father, as children do, and Kemi struggled with how much truth to share. She settled on a version that was honest but not bitter. Their father was a man from a different culture who hadn't been ready to be a parent. And while that was his loss, it didn't diminish their worth in any way. "Will we ever meet him?" Zara asked one day when she was 8, her young face serious with the weight of the question. "I don't know, sweetheart," Kemi answered honestly. "But what I do know is that you and Quame are the most important people in the world, and you don't need anyone else to complete your story." What Kemi didn't tell her daughter was that she had been quietly following Omar's career from afar. Not out of longing or hope, but out of a strategic awareness that their paths might cross again someday. She knew about his marriage to Yasmin, about his rise to CEO of Rashid Industries, about his expansion into renewable energy markets. And when the opportunity arose to acquire a controlling stake in his company through a complex series of investments and partnerships, Kemi didn't hesitate. It wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. It was about showing Omar exactly what he had walked away from, and what that choice had cost him. 20 years after he had abandoned her, Kemi was finally ready to face Omar Rashid again. But this time, she would be the one holding all the cards. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, present-day Omar Rashid stood at the head of the mahogany boardroom table, watching his executives file out after another successful quarterly review. Rashid Industries had just posted record profits for the third consecutive year. Their renewable energy division had secured contracts across the Middle East and North Africa, and their stock price had reached an all-time high. By every measurable standard, Omar had built an empire that surpassed even his father's ambitious expectations. So why did he feel so empty? "Excellent presentation today," said his CFO, Malik Hassan, lingering behind as the room cleared. "The board will be thrilled with these numbers." Omar nodded absently, his attention drawn to the family photo on his desk, a formal portrait from last year's Eid celebration. He stood in the center wearing traditional robes, flanked by his wife Yasmin and their 3 children, 15-year-old Amira, 12-year-old Faisal, and 8-year-old Layla. They looked like the perfect family, successful and harmonious, everything his father had envisioned when he arranged the marriage 20 years ago. But perfection, Omar had learned, was often indistinguishable from emptiness. "Sir," Malik's voice pulled him back to the present. "The Al Mansouri merger documents are ready for your review." Omar suppressed a bitter laugh. Even now, 20 years into his marriage, business with his in-laws felt more like diplomacy than family relationships. Yasmin's father, Fahad al-Mansouri, had never let Omar forget that their union was a strategic alliance first and a marriage second. "Leave them on my desk. I'll review them tonight." After Malik left, Omar found himself alone with his thoughts. Dangerous place for a man carrying 20 years of regret. He walked to his office window and gazed out at the Riyadh skyline, remembering another life, another version of himself who had briefly believed that love could triumph over duty. His phone buzzed with a text from Yasmin. "Don't forget Amira's recital tonight at 7 p.m. Please try to be on time for once." The message stung, though he couldn't argue with its accuracy. He had missed more family events than he had attended, always citing business obligations that seemed urgent at the time, but felt hollow in retrospect. His relationship with his children was cordial but distant. They respected him as a provider and authority figure, but he doubted they truly knew him as a person. Omar thought about his own father, Halil Rashid, who had passed away 5 years earlier. On his deathbed, the old man had expressed satisfaction with Omar's achievements, pride in the empire he had built, gratitude that the family name would continue to command respect for generations. But he had never asked if Omar was happy. It was as if the question had never occurred to him that happiness might be a worthy goal alongside success and honor. A knock at his office door interrupted his brooding. "Come in," he called, expecting his assistant with the day's final appointments. Instead, his brother Tariq entered, carrying 2 cups of Arabic coffee and wearing an expression that Omar had learned to read as trouble brewing. "You look like you're planning a funeral," Tariq said, settling into one of the leather chairs facing Omar's desk. At 38, Tariq was 7 years younger than Omar, but their father's expectations had fallen less heavily on his shoulders. As the second son, he had been allowed more freedom to pursue his own interests, though he had ultimately chosen to work within the family business as head of international operations. "Just thinking," Omar replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Dangerous habit for a man in your position." Tariq's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. "What's eating at you? And don't say it's nothing, I've known you too long." Omar hesitated. Of all his family members, Tariq was the only one with whom he had ever shared anything approaching honesty about his personal struggles. But even with his brother, there were secrets too dangerous to voice. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had made different choices?" Omar asked carefully. Tariq raised an eyebrow. "You mean like if I had studied art instead of business? If you had told father where to stick his marriage plans?" The casual mention of defying their father's marriage arrangements hit closer to home than Tariq could have known. Omar felt his chest tighten with the familiar weight of unspoken guilt. Something like that. "Honestly, I think we'd probably be happier but poorer. Father's way gave us security, status, financial success. But it also gave us lives that feel like they belong to someone else." Tariq leaned forward, studying his brother's face. "Is this about Yasmin? Are you two having problems?" Omar shook his head. "No more than usual. We coexist peacefully enough. She has her charity work and social obligations. I have the business. The children are healthy and successful in school. By any objective measure, we have a good life. But sometimes, I feel like I'm living someone else's dream instead of my own." Tariq was quiet for a moment, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, there's something I never told you about my time in London. I met someone there, a woman who challenged everything I thought I knew about what I wanted from life. For about 6 months, I seriously considered walking away from all of this, changing my name, and starting over somewhere else." Omar's breath caught. "What stopped you?" "Fear, mostly. And the knowledge that I wasn't brave enough to disappoint father. The way you would have had to if you had chosen differently." Tariq met his brother's eyes. "But sometimes I wonder if cowardice disguised as duty is really worth the security it provides." The conversation was veering into territory that made Omar deeply uncomfortable. He had spent 2 decades perfecting the art of not thinking about the road not taken, and his brother's unexpected honesty was threatening to crack the carefully constructed walls around his memories. "We should go," Omar said abruptly, standing and straightening his tie. "I promised Yasmin I'd be on time for Amira's recital." Tariq nodded, recognizing the deflection for what it was. "Of course, but Omar," he paused at the door, "if you ever want to talk about whatever it is you're not talking about, I'm here." The recital was held at Amira's prestigious private school, in an auditorium filled with other wealthy families dutifully attending their children's performances. Omar sat between Yasmin and Faisal, applauding at the appropriate moments while his mind wandered to places it shouldn't go. Amira was talented, he had to admit. Her piano performance of a Chopin nocturne was technically proficient and emotionally nuanced for someone her age. But as he watched her play, Omar found himself wondering about other children who shared his DNA, but had grown up without his name, his resources, or his presence. "She's wonderful, isn't she?" Yasmin whispered, squeezing his arm with genuine maternal pride. "Yes," Omar agreed, and meant it. Amira was wonderful, as were Faisal and Layla. They were good children who deserved better than a father who was physically present but emotionally absent, who provided everything except the one thing that couldn't be bought: authentic love. That night, after the family had gone to bed, Omar sat in his home office reviewing the merger documents Malik had left for him. But the numbers blurred together as his thoughts drifted to a conversation he had overheard between his children earlier that evening. "Do you think Baba is happy?" Layla had asked Amira as they prepared for bed. "I don't think happiness is something adults worry about," Amira had replied with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a teenager. They worry about success and reputation and making sure we have good futures. But don't you want to be happy when you're grown up? I think happiness is a luxury we can't afford in families like ours. The casual resignation in his 15-year-old daughter's voice had shattered something inside Omar she had already internalized. The same limiting beliefs that had shaped his own choices, the idea that duty and happiness were mutually exclusive, that love was something to be sacrificed for stability. Omar closed the merger documents without reading them and walked to his private study, where he kept the few personal mementos he had allowed himself to preserve from his time in England. Hidden behind a row of business journals was a single photograph from his Cambridge graduation, Kemi laughing at something he had said, her head thrown back in joy, her eyes bright with possibilities that had seemed infinite at the time. He had told himself for 20 years that keeping this photo was masochistic, that it served no purpose except to remind him of his failures. But he had never been able to throw it away. It was the only evidence he had that he had once been capable of making someone genuinely happy, that love had once felt more important than everything else combined. As he stared at Kemi's face in the photograph, Omar wondered for the 1000th time what had become of her. Was she married? Did she have children? Had she ever forgiven him for his cowardice, or did she still carry the pain he had caused her? What he didn't know was that in less than 48 hours, he would have answers to all of those questions. What he couldn't have imagined was that those answers would come delivered by the woman herself, sitting across from him in his own boardroom, holding the power to destroy everything he had built in the 20 years since he had walked away from the only authentic love he had ever known. The hollow crown he had worn for so long was about to be revealed for what it truly was. A beautiful prison of his own construction. And the woman he had abandoned held the only key that could set him free or lock him away forever. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. 2 days later, Omar Rashid's morning routine was sacred and unchanging. Prayer at dawn. An hour of exercise in his private gym. Breakfast with financial reports, and arrival at his office by 7:30 a.m. sharp. This Tuesday morning felt no different as he settled behind his desk, reviewing the agenda for what promised to be a routine board meeting about quarterly projections and upcoming infrastructure investments. His assistant, Layla Al-Zahra, knocked and entered with her usual efficiency. "Good morning, Mr. Rashid. I have the board meeting materials ready, and all attendees have confirmed, except for the new investor representative." Omar looked up from his tablet. "New investor representative?" "Yes, sir. The Adebayo Green Energy Consortium acquired a significant stake in our renewable energy division last month. Their representative will be joining today's meeting to discuss expansion strategies." Layla consulted her notes. "A Ms. Kemi Adebayo, CEO of the consortium. Her credentials are quite impressive. She's been instrumental in developing sustainable energy projects across 3 continents." The name hit Omar like a physical blow. The tablet slipped from his hands, clattering onto his desk as blood drained from his face. Kemi Adebayo. After 20 years, that name still had the power to stop his world on its axis. "Sir, are you all right?" Layla stepped forward, concern evident in her voice. Omar forced himself to breathe, to maintain the composure that had become second nature after decades of corporate leadership. "Yes, I'm fine. Just, when did you say this acquisition took place?" "Last month, sir. The legal department handled most of the paperwork since it was a standard investment transaction." "Should I postpone the meeting?" "No," Omar said quickly, his mind racing. "No, let's proceed as scheduled." "What time was Ms. Adebayo expected to arrive?" "In about an hour, sir. She's flying in from Geneva this morning." "Geneva. Of course she would be coming from Geneva." Omar's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee, memories flooding back despite his efforts to maintain control. This couldn't be a coincidence. Kemi didn't do anything without strategic purpose. She never had. That will be all, Layla. Please ensure that everything is prepared for our guests. After his assistant left, Omar sat alone in his office, staring at his reflection in the dark computer screen. 20 years of carefully constructed success, 20 years of buried guilt and unspoken regret, and now she was coming here. To his boardroom. To his company. The irony was almost unbearable. He had spent 2 decades building Rashid Industries into a renewable energy powerhouse, partly as a way to honor the dreams Kemi had shared with him about sustainable development in Africa. Every wind farm they built, every solar installation they funded, carried the ghost of conversations they'd had about changing the world together. And now she was here as an investor, as someone with power over his company's future. The woman he had abandoned was returning as someone who could influence his destiny. Omar's intercom buzzed. "Sir, Ms. Adebayo has arrived. She's in conference room A with her legal team." His throat tightened. "Her legal team?" "Yes, sir. 3 attorneys and 2 financial advisors. They've requested a private consultation before the board meeting. This was more than just an investment meeting." Omar felt the familiar weight of an impossible situation settling on his shoulders, the same trapped feeling he had experienced in Cambridge when love and duty had pulled him in opposite directions. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." Omar stood and walked to his private bathroom, splashing cold water on his face and staring at the man in the mirror. At 45, he looked older than his years, the weight of responsibility and unfulfilled dreams etched into the lines around his eyes. His hair was still thick but now threaded with silver, and his body had the soft edges of a man who had traded physical vitality for boardroom victories. What would Kemi see when she looked at him? The coward who had abandoned her, or the successful businessman he had become? Did it matter? The walk to conference room felt like a journey through time. Each step brought him closer to a reckoning he had spent 20 years avoiding. When he reached the door, he paused with his hand on the handle, trying to prepare himself for a moment that no amount of corporate training could have equipped him to handle. He opened the door and stepped into his past. Kemi sat at the head of the conference table like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. At 43, she was more beautiful than Omar remembered, her natural beauty refined by confidence and success. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore a sharp black business suit that commanded respect. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, the same intelligent, penetrating gaze that had captivated him in a Cambridge lecture hall 24 years ago. Those eyes looked at him now with no warmth, no recognition of their shared history. Just the cool assessment of a successful businesswoman evaluating a potential business partner. "Mr. Rashid," she said, rising from her seat with fluid grace. "Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice. I'm Kemi Adebayo, CEO of Adebayo Green Energy Solutions." She extended her hand for a business handshake, and Omar found himself moving forward as if in a dream. When their fingers touched, he felt the same electric connection that had defined their relationship 2 decades ago, but Kemi's expression remained perfectly neutral. "Ms. Adebayo," he managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. "Welcome to Rashid Industries. Thank you. I'd like you to meet my team." She introduced the attorneys and financial advisors with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to high-stakes business negotiations. "We're excited about the partnership opportunities between our organizations." Partnership. The word hung in the air, loaded with implications that only the 2 of them could fully understand. Omar nodded and took his seat across from her, feeling like he was playing a game where only Kemi knew the rules. "Your renewable energy division has shown impressive growth over the past 5 years," Kemi continued, consulting a thick folder of documents. "Particularly your solar installations in Morocco and wind farms in Jordan. Very impressive work." Omar found his voice. "Thank you. We've always believed that sustainable energy is not just an environmental imperative, but a business opportunity. Yes. I've followed your company's development quite closely. Your vision for renewable energy in the Middle East and North Africa aligns perfectly with our investment strategy. She paused, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a flash of the woman he had known, the woman who had dreamed of changing the world. In fact, some of your initiatives remind me of conversations I had years ago with a young business student about the potential for sustainable development across Africa. The reference was subtle but unmistakable. She was letting him know that she remembered everything, that this meeting was not the cosmic coincidence it appeared to be. Those conversations must have been quite prescient, Omar replied carefully. Indeed. Though sometimes the people we share our visions with don't always have the courage to see them through to completion. Her smile was polite, professional, and sharp as a blade. One of her attorneys leaned forward. Ms. Adebayo, should we discuss the specific terms of the expanded investment? Of course. Kemi opened another folder, all business once again. Adebayo. Green Energy is prepared to increase our investment in Rashid Industries by $300 million, contingent on certain operational changes. Omar's eyebrows rose. $300 million was significant enough to fund major expansion across multiple countries. What kind of operational changes? We want a seat on your board of directors, and we want to establish a joint venture for a new initiative, sustainable energy development, specifically focused on sub-Saharan Africa. The project would be headquartered in Geneva, but would operate across 12 African nations. Omar felt the ground shifting beneath him. That's a substantial commitment. It is, but we believe Rashid Industries has the infrastructure and expertise to make it successful. The only question is whether your leadership team has the vision and courage to embrace such an ambitious partnership. There was that word again, courage. Coming from Kemi, it felt like both a challenge and an accusation. I'd need to review the proposal with my board, Omar said. Naturally. But Mr. Rashid, I should mention that this offer comes with a timeline. We're presenting similar opportunities to 3 other companies this week. We'll need a decision within 72 hours. She was backing him into a corner, forcing him to make a rapid decision about a partnership that would inevitably mean working closely with her. Omar realized that this wasn't just about business. This was about unfinished business. I understand. We'll give your proposal the urgent attention it deserves. Kemi stood, and her team began gathering their materials. Excellent. Oh, and Mr. Rashid? I should mention that my children will be joining me for the remainder of my stay in Riyadh. They're quite interested in seeing the city where their She paused deliberately, where this important business partnership might be forged. Children, the word hit Omar like a thunderbolt. After 20 years, he was about to meet the children he had abandoned before they were born. The twins who carried his DNA but had grown up without his name. How old are your children? He asked. Though he already knew the answer. 19 twins, actually. Zara and Kwangim. They're both studying at Cambridge, following in their mother's footsteps, you might say. Cambridge. Of course they were at Cambridge, where their parents had met, where their story had begun. The symmetry was almost cruel. I look forward to meeting them, Omar said, the words feeling like both a truth and a lie. Kemi's smile was enigmatic. I'm sure you will find them quite remarkable. They've grown up to be everything I hoped they would be, despite the challenges of their early years. As she moved toward the door, she paused and looked back at him. For just a moment, the professional mask slipped, and Omar saw a flash of the pain he had caused her, the strength she had developed in his absence, and something else, a sense of purpose that made him realize this encounter was far from accidental. Thank you for your time, Mr. Rashid. I'll be in touch soon about your decision. And then she was gone, leaving Omar alone with the devastating realization that his past had not just caught up with him, it had surrounded him. cornered him, and was now demanding a reckoning that was 20 years overdue. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The same evening, Omar sat in his private study at home. The Adebayo green energy proposal spread across his mahogany desk like evidence of a crime he had committed 20 years ago. The numbers were staggering. $300 million would not only secure Rashid Industries' position as the dominant renewable energy company in the region, but it would also fund the African expansion he had secretly dreamed about for decades. But the cost would be working alongside the woman whose life he had shattered, and meeting the children he had abandoned before they drew their first breath. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Dr. Hassan Al-Mahmoud had been his therapist for 3 years, the only person who knew the full truth about Omar's past and the guilt that had eaten away at him like acid. "Omar, it's quite late. Is everything all right?" "Hassan, I need to see you. Tonight, if possible." There was a pause. "This sounds serious. Can you tell me what's happened?" "She's back, Kemi. She's here in Riyadh, and she wants to do business with my company." Another pause, longer this time. "I see. And how do you feel about that?" Omar laughed bitterly. "How do I feel? Terrified. Guilty. Like I'm about to face judgment for every cowardly decision I've made in the past 20 years. Come to my office. I'll meet you there in an hour." After ending the call, Omar walked to his bedroom where Yasmin was preparing for bed, applying her nightly skincare routine with the methodical precision that characterized everything she did. In her silk nightgown, with her hair loose around her shoulders, she looked younger than her 42 years. She was still beautiful, still the perfect wife his father had chosen for him. "You're home earlier than usual," she said without looking at him in the mirror. "How was the board meeting?" Omar hesitated. 20 years of marriage had taught him to navigate conversations with Yasmin carefully. She was intelligent, perceptive, and had long ago learned to read between the lines of his carefully constructed responses. "We had some new investors present. Significant ones. They're proposing a major partnership." "That's good news, isn't it? You've been talking about expanding into Africa for years." The casual mention of Africa made Omar's stomach clench. Yes, it could be very beneficial for the company. Yasmin finally turned to face him, studying his expression with the practiced eye of a woman who had learned to decipher her husband's moods. "You don't look like a man who just received good news. What aren't you telling me?" This was the moment Omar had been dreading since Kemi walked into his conference room. "How do you explain to your wife that the woman you truly loved has returned to claim a piece of your life? How do you admit that your marriage, successful as it appeared to the outside world, had always been a consolation prize? The investors are from Geneva. The CEO is someone I knew from university." Yasmin's expression didn't change, but Omar caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "Someone you knew well?" "We were friends, study partners. It was a long time ago." "I see." Yasmin turned back to her mirror, but Omar could see the tension in her shoulders. "And this friend is now in a position to influence our company's future. It appears so." Yasmin was quiet for several moments, applying moisturizer with unnecessary focus. Finally, she spoke again, her voice carefully neutral. "You know, Omar, in 20 years of marriage, you've told me very little about your time in England. Sometimes I wonder if there are parts of your past that you've deliberately kept from me." The observation hit too close to home. "My time at Cambridge was just preparation for this life, for the responsibilities I have here. There's nothing worth revisiting." "Nothing?" Yasmin met his eyes in the mirror. "Or nothing you're willing to share with your wife?" Omar felt the familiar weight of deception settling on his chest. "Yasmin, please, it's been a long day." She nodded, but he could see the hurt in her expression. "Of course. I'll let you get some rest." As Omar left for his appointment with Dr. Al-Mahmoud, he caught a glimpse of Yasmin through their bedroom window. She was sitting on the edge of their bed, staring at her hands, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely sorry for the woman who had been trapped in a loveless marriage by the same family expectations that had destroyed his chance at happiness. Dr. Al-Mahmoud's office was located in a discreet medical building in central Riyadh, far from the prying eyes of society reporters who tracked the movements of prominent families. The therapist was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and the patience of someone who had heard every variation of human suffering. "Tell me about the meeting," he said after Omar had settled into the familiar leather chair across from his desk. "Omar, describe the encounter in detail." Kemi's professional demeanor, her subtle references to their past, the staggering investment offer, and the revelation that their children were now adults studying at Cambridge. How did it feel to see her again? Like being hit by a truck. Omar rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. She looked powerful, successful, everything I always knew she could become. And I felt like a fraud sitting across from her, pretending to be a successful businessman when really I'm just a man who's been running from his mistakes for 20 years. Do you think her presence here is purely coincidental? Omar shook his head. No, Kemi doesn't do anything without purpose. She's here because she has something to prove, or something to settle. What do you think she wants? I don't know. Maybe she wants to show me what I lost. Maybe she wants to destroy what I built. Maybe she just wants to watch me squirm. Omar leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Or maybe she wants me to finally meet our children. And how does that possibility make you feel? Terrified, excited, guilty. How do you meet children you abandoned before they were born? How do you explain to 19-year-olds that their father was too much of a coward to fight for them? Dr. Al-Mahmoud was quiet for a moment, his pen moving across his notepad. Omar, for 3 years we've talked about your regret, your guilt, your sense of living an inauthentic life. Now you're being presented with an opportunity to confront those feelings directly. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I don't know if I have a choice. If I turn down this investment, I'm letting personal feelings interfere with business decisions that affect hundreds of employees. If I accept it, I'm entering into a partnership with someone who has every reason to want revenge. Do you think she wants revenge? Omar considered the question. The Kemi I knew wasn't vindictive. She was passionate, idealistic, someone who believed in building things rather than tearing them down. But I hurt her badly. I destroyed her trust in love, in partnership, in the idea that someone could choose her over everything else. I don't know what that kind of pain does to a person over 20 years. There's only one way to find out. What's that? Talk to her. Not as a business partner, but as the father of her children. As the man who loved her and made a terrible mistake. Omar felt his chest tighten. She never agreed to that kind of conversation. Are you sure? She came all the way to Riyadh. Omar. She could have sent representatives to handle this business. She could have stayed in Geneva and managed the investment remotely. But she came here herself, and she brought your children with her. That suggests this is about more than just business. The session continued for another hour, but Omar's mind kept returning to one haunting question. What kind of people had Zara and Quaim become? Did they have his analytical mind or Kemi's passionate heart? Did they know about him at all, or had Kemi erased him from their story entirely? As he drove home through the empty streets of Riyadh, Omar made a decision that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. He was going to accept Kemi's investment proposal, not because it made business sense, though it did. Because he needed to know what had become of the life he had walked away from. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Omar, this is Kemi. I wanted to let you know that Zara and Quaim will be joining me for a site visit to your Alcard solar facility tomorrow afternoon. They're quite interested in renewable energy applications in arid climates. I thought you should know. Omar pulled over to the side of the road, his hands trembling as he reread the message. Tomorrow he would meet his children. Tomorrow he would look into the faces of the twins whose existence he had denied for 19 years. He typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on something simple. Thank you for letting me know. I look forward to meeting them. Her reply came immediately. I'm sure you do. Just remember, Omar, they don't know who you are. As far as they're concerned, you're just another business associate. Let's keep it that way for now. The message felt like both a protection and a punishment. Kemi was giving him the chance to meet his children, but on her terms, under her conditions. He would be in their presence, but he couldn't claim them. He could see what they had become, but he couldn't tell them who he was. As Omar sat in his car on the empty highway, he realized that Kemi's revenge was more sophisticated than anything he could have imagined. She wasn't going to destroy his business or expose his secrets to his family. She was going to make him live with the full knowledge of what his cowardice had cost him, forcing him to see his children while knowing he had no right to their love, their respect, or their acknowledgement. It was perfect, terrible, and absolutely devastating. And it was only the beginning. Al-Kar's solar facility, Saudi Arabia. The next afternoon, Omar stood at the observation deck of the Al-Kar solar facility, watching the endless rows of photovoltaic panels stretch toward the horizon like a metallic sea. The facility was his pride and joy. 50,000 panels, generating enough clean energy to power 15,000 homes. It represented everything he had built in the 20 years since he had walked away from his dreams with Kemi. But today, the achievement felt hollow. In less than an hour, he would meet Zara and Quaim, and he had no idea how to prepare for such a moment. How do you ready yourself to look into the faces of children who carry your DNA, but don't know your name? His facility manager, engineer Mahmoud Qasimi, approached with a tablet full of technical specifications. Sir, the tour route is prepared. We'll start with the control center, move through the maintenance facility, and end here at the observation deck for the overview presentation. Omar nodded absently, his attention focused on the access road where a black SUV was approaching, dust trailing behind it in the desert heat. His heart hammered against his ribs as the vehicle drew closer. Sir, are you feeling well? You look pale. I'm fine, Mahmoud. Just ensure everything goes smoothly. These investors are very important to our future. The SUV stopped at the facility entrance, and Omar watched through binoculars as three figures emerged. Kemi stepped out first. Wearing a crisp white blouse and dark slacks, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked completely at ease, like she belonged in this desert landscape as much as she had belonged in the libraries of Cambridge. Then came the twins. Omar's breath caught in his throat as he saw them for the first time. Zara emerged from the passenger side, tall and elegant like her mother, with long natural hair that caught the sunlight. She moved with confident grace, her dark eyes already scanning the facility with obvious intelligence and curiosity. She wore a flowing blue dress that somehow managed to look both modest and striking. Quaim followed from the other side of the vehicle, and Omar felt like he was looking at a ghost of his younger self. The young man had Omar's height and build, his strong jawline and thick black hair. But his eyes, those were Kemi's, warm and expressive, full of the same intellectual fire that had captivated Omar decades ago. My God, Omar whispered, not realizing he had spoken aloud. Sir, nothing. Let's go meet our guests. The walk down to the entrance felt like the longest journey of Omar's life. Each step brought him closer to a moment that could reshape everything. He thought he knew about fatherhood, legacy, and the prices we pay for our choices. Kemi saw him approaching and stepped forward with the same professional demeanor she had displayed in the boardroom. Mr. Rashid, thank you for accommodating our visit on such short notice. Of course. We're always pleased to showcase our facilities to potential partners. Omar's voice sounded strange to his own ears, too formal, too distant. I'd like you to meet my children. Kemi said, and Omar felt the world tilt slightly. This is my daughter Zara and my son Quaim. They're both studying environmental engineering at Cambridge. Zara stepped forward first, extending her hand with a smile that stopped Omar's heart. It was Kemi's smile, but there was something of his own. Mother in the way she tilted her head, a gesture he recognized from his own childhood. Mr. Rashid, it's an honor to meet you. Your facility's reputation precedes it. We studied your water conservation techniques in our Sustainable Systems course last semester. Omar shook her hand, marveling at the strength of her grip, the confidence in her voice. Thank you, Zara. I'm impressed that Cambridge is teaching about our work here. Oh, they are. Professor Williams specifically mentioned your integrated cooling system as an example of innovation in desert solar applications. Her eyes lit up with enthusiasm. I'm particularly interested in how you've managed to maintain efficiency levels, despite the sandstorms. The filtration system must be incredibly sophisticated. Omar found himself genuinely engaged despite the emotional turmoil. It is. We've developed a specialized coating for the panels and an automated cleaning system that activates based on particulate density readings. Would you like to see the technical specifications? I would love that. Quaim stepped forward next, and Omar braced himself for another emotional impact. The young man's handshake was firm, his demeanor more reserved than his sister's, but equally intelligent. Mr. Rashid, I've been following your company's expansion into Morocco and Jordan. The economic impact studies are fascinating. You've managed to create sustainable employment while maintaining competitive energy costs. Omar blinked in surprise. You've read our economic impact studies? Yes, sir. I'm particularly interested in the intersection of renewable energy development and socioeconomic change in developing economies. Your model could be revolutionary for sub-Saharan Africa. The words hit Omar like a physical blow. Sub-Saharan Africa, the same region he and Kemi had dreamed of transforming together 24 years ago. Their son was passionate about the same vision that had brought his parents together. That's exactly what we hope to achieve with our expansion plans. Omar managed. Kemi watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. Quaim has been working on his thesis about sustainable development policies. He's quite passionate about the subject. It's not just academic for me, Quaim said, his voice carrying the same conviction that Omar remembered from Kemi's speeches about changing the world. I grew up hearing about the potential for technology to leapfrog traditional infrastructure. In Africa, my mother always said that renewable energy could be the key to breaking cycles of economic dependence. Omar's chest tightened. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She taught us that having privileged education, resources, opportunities comes with responsibility to use those gifts for something meaningful. The tour began, and Omar found himself caught between professional obligation and personal fascination. Zara asked technical questions that demonstrated a deep understanding of engineering principles, while Quaim focused on implementation strategies and economic sustainability. They were brilliant, passionate, and everything Omar could have hoped for in children, but they were also strangers to him, young adults who had been shaped entirely by Kemi's values and guidance. Every achievement they demonstrated, every insightful question they asked, was a testament to their mother's strength and a reminder of Omar's absence. At the control center, Zara examined the monitoring systems with obvious excitement. This is incredible. You're tracking efficiency across individual panel clusters in real time. How do you handle data processing for this volume of inputs? Omar launched into an explanation of their machine learning algorithms, finding genuine pleasure in her enthusiasm. For a few minutes, he forgot about the complex emotional undercurrents and simply enjoyed sharing knowledge with someone who appreciated the technical achievement. Quaim, meanwhile, was studying the facility map with engineer Qasimi. The worker housing community is integrated into the facility design. That's unusual for industrial projects of this scale. Mr. Rashid insisted on it, Kemi explained. He believes that sustainable energy projects should also create sustainable communities. That's exactly right, Kemi said with evident approval. Economic development without social consideration isn't really development at all. Omar felt a surge of pride followed immediately by crushing guilt. His son understood principles that Omar himself had learned partly from Kemi, principles he had tried to implement in his business as a way of honoring the dreams they had shared. But Kemi had learned these values directly from his mother, developing his own passion for justice and sustainability without any input from his father. The tour continued to the maintenance facility, where Zara engaged the technicians in detailed discussions about panel cleaning protocols and preventive maintenance schedules. Her questions were so sophisticated that Omar realized she could probably run a facility like this herself with minimal training. "She's remarkable," he said quietly to Kemi as they watched Zara examine a partially disassembled solar panel. "Yes, she is." Kemi's voice was carefully neutral. "Both of them are. They're lucky to have you as a mother." Kemi's expression hardened slightly. "They're lucky to have each other. Growing up, it was often just the three of us against the world." The subtle barb hit its mark. Omar felt the weight of every birthday he had missed, every school performance he hadn't attended, every moment of struggle Kemi had faced alone while raising their children. As they reached the observation deck for the final presentation, Kemi approached Omar with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Rashid, can I ask you something personal?" Omar's heart stopped. "Of course. Do you have children?" The question felt like a dagger to the chest. Omar glanced at Kemi, who was watching the exchange with intense focus. "Yes, I do. 3 children. Do you ever include them in your work? Bring them to see what you've built?" Omar thought about Amira, Faisal and Layla, who had visited his facilities perhaps a dozen times in their lives, always seeming bored and eager to leave. "Sometimes, though they're not as interested in renewable energy as you and your sister seem to be," Kemi nodded. "We grew up visiting my mother's projects around the world. She always said that understanding how your parents spend their days helps you understand what they value most." Another perfect strike. Omar's children knew him as a provider and authority figure, but they had never shown curiosity about his work or his values. They respected his success, but didn't share his passion. "Your mother raised you well, Omar," said his voice thick with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "She did. Though sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to have a father who shared her vision, who could have been a partner in building the kind of world she dreams about." The words hung in the air like an accusation and a lament. Kemi stepped forward, her professional mask firmly in place. "I think we should wrap up the tour. We have a dinner meeting back in Riyadh." As they prepared to leave, Zara shook Omar's hand again. "Thank you for such an enlightening visit. This facility is truly inspiring." "Thank you, Zara. I hope you'll consider Rashid Industries for internship opportunities when you complete your studies." Her smile was warm and genuine. "I'd love that. The work you're doing here could change everything for renewable energy in desert climates." Kemi's farewell was more formal but equally appreciative. "Mr. Rashid, I hope we'll have opportunities to collaborate in the future. The African expansion project my mother mentioned sounds exactly like the kind of initiative the world needs." As Omar watched them drive away, he felt a complex mixture of pride, loss, and devastating regret. He had just spent 3 hours with his children, and they were everything he could have hoped for: brilliant, passionate, ethical, and driven to make a positive impact on the world. But they were also completely foreign to him, shaped by experiences he had never shared and values he had only admired from a distance. They belonged entirely to Kemi's world, and he was nothing more than a business acquaintance who had briefly intersected with their lives. The cruelest part was that he could see himself in them, in Zara's technical curiosity and Kemi's social consciousness, but they would never see themselves in him. To them, he was just another wealthy businessman showing off his achievements. As the dust from their departure settled in the desert air, Omar realized that Kemi's revenge was even more sophisticated than he had imagined. She hadn't just shown him what he had lost, she had shown him exactly what he could have been part of building, the legacy he could have shared, the family he could have helped shape. And now he would have to live with the knowledge that the most important things he had ever created were walking away from him, not knowing they carried his name in their DNA but not in their hearts. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That evening Omar sat in his home office, staring at a glass of whiskey he had poured but hadn't touched. The amber liquid caught the light from his desk lamp, creating patterns that reminded him of Zara's eyes when she had smiled at him during the facility tour. The meeting with his children had left him feeling like a man who had discovered buried treasure only to realize he had no right to claim it. His phone buzzed with a text from Kemi. "The children were very impressed with your facility. They're both interested in the African expansion project. Perhaps we should discuss the partnership terms tomorrow morning. My hotel, 9 a.m., Ka Omar." Typed and deleted several responses before settling on, "I'll be there." Her reply was immediate. "Good, and Omar, come alone." The emphasis on the last two words sent a chill through him. This wasn't going to be a business meeting. This was going to be a reckoning. Soft knock at his office door interrupted his brooding. "Come in." Yasmin entered carrying a cup of tea, her expression carefully neutral. She had perfected the art of appearing supportive while harboring private doubts, a skill essential to the wives of powerful men in their social circle. "You missed dinner again," she said, setting the tea on his desk. "The children asked where you were." Omar felt another stab of guilt. While he had been obsessing over the children he had abandoned, he had neglected the ones who called him father every day. "I'm sorry. There's been a lot on my mind with this new investment opportunity." Yasmin studied his face with the practiced eye of a woman who had learned to read between the lines of 20 years of marriage. "This investor from your university days, she's really affecting you, isn't she?" The directness of the question caught Omar off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in 20 years of marriage, I've never seen you this unsettled by a business meeting. You've negotiated with oil ministers, heads of state, and billionaire sheiks without breaking a sweat. But one meeting with this woman has you drinking alone in your office." Omar picked up the whiskey glass but set it down without drinking. "It's complicated. Most things worth discussing are." Yasmin sat in the chair across from his desk, making it clear she wasn't leaving without answers. "Omar, I've never asked you about your time in England because I respected your privacy. But I'm asking now, who was she to you?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with 20 years of unspoken tensions. Omar looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw not just the perfect society matron his father had chosen for him, but a woman who had spent 2 decades married to a man who had never fully belonged to her. "We were close, very close. Close enough that seeing her again has you questioning everything in your life?" Omar was silent for a long moment. "Yasmin, what would you have done if you had been forced to choose between love and duty?" The question seemed to surprise her. "I did choose, Omar. I chose duty. We both did when we agreed to this marriage." She paused, her voice softening. "But I've often wondered if you left part of your heart in England." The admission hit Omar harder than any accusation could have. "I'm sorry. For what? For being human? For having loved someone before you were obligated to love me?" Yasmin shook her head. "I've known for years that there was someone else. I just never expected her to show up in our boardroom." Omar met his wife's eyes, seeing a depth of understanding he hadn't expected. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to figure out what unfinished business you have with this woman and resolve it. Because this halfway existence, where you're physically present but emotionally absent, isn't fair to any of us." After Yasmin left, Omar sat alone with his thoughts and the weight of 20 years of accumulated secrets. He pulled out his laptop and began researching Kemi's company more thoroughly, trying to understand how she had built such a successful enterprise while raising their children alone. What he found was remarkable. Adebayo Green Energy Solutions wasn't just profitable, it was revolutionary. Kemi had pioneered microfinancing models for rural solar installations, developed low-cost wind turbines suitable for remote communities, and created training programs that employed thousands of people across sub-Saharan Africa. But it was the company's mission statement that stopped him cold. We believe that sustainable energy is not just an environmental imperative, but a tool for social justice. Every project we undertake is designed to empower communities, create economic opportunities, and build a foundation for lasting prosperity. These were the exact words Kemi had used in their conversations at Cambridge. She had taken their shared vision and made it reality, building the kind of company they had dreamed of creating together. Omar found himself scrolling through photos from Kemi's projects, solar installations in Nigerian villages, wind farms in Kenya, training centers in Ghana. In many of the pictures, he could see Zara and Quain as children, visiting construction sites, talking to local workers, learning about the business that was transforming lives across a continent. They had grown up as part of their mother's mission, understanding from an early age that business could be a force for positive change. No wonder they were so passionate about sustainable development. It wasn't just an academic subject for them. It was the family business. The next morning, Omar arrived at Kemi's hotel exactly at 9 a.m. The Four Seasons Riyadh was where all the international business elite stayed, and Kemi had booked the penthouse suite. When he knocked on the door, she answered immediately, as if she had been waiting by the entrance. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. The suite was elegant and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Kemi had clearly been working. Laptops were open on the dining table, documents were spread across every surface, and multiple phones were charging on the counter. "Coffee?" she asked, pouring herself a cup from an elaborate service that had been set up by the window. "Please." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two middle-aged professionals who had once been young lovers, now trying to navigate the complex terrain of their shared history. "They're remarkable," Omar said finally. "Zara and Quaim, you've raised extraordinary children." Kemi's expression softened slightly. "Thank you. They are my greatest achievement. They're passionate about the same things we used to talk about. The African development projects, sustainable communities, using business as a force for social change. They grew up with those values. It wasn't theoretical for them, they saw it happening every day." Omar felt the familiar weight of regret settling on his chest. "I should have been there." "Yes, you should have." Kemi's voice was steady but not unkind. "But you weren't, and we managed without you, more than managed. You built something incredible." Kemi walked to the window, gazing out at the city where Omar had built his own empire. "Do you know what the hardest part was? Not the financial struggle, not the sleepless nights with infant twins, not even the social isolation of being a single mother in a foreign country. The hardest part was explaining to them why their father wasn't there." Omar's throat tightened. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That their father was a man who wasn't ready to be a parent, who chose the expectations of others over the love of his family." She turned to face him. "But I also told them that his absence didn't diminish their worth, and that sometimes the people who love us aren't strong enough to fight for that love. Did they ever ask about me? Want to meet me?" Kemi was quiet for a long moment. "When they were younger, yes. Especially Quaim. He used to create elaborate fantasies about you, that you were a secret agent, or exploring uncharted territories, or building schools in remote villages. Anything that would explain why you couldn't be with us." Each word felt like a physical blow. "And now? Now they're adults who understand that the world is complicated and that people make choices they have to live with." Kemi sat down across from him. But Omar, there's something you need to know. They figured out who you are. Omar's blood turned to ice. What? They're not stupid. Two brilliant engineering students meet a successful businessman who built his career on the exact same renewable energy principles their mother has been passionate about their entire lives. In a country where their mother just happens to be negotiating a major business deal? Kemi shook her head. They started asking questions yesterday evening. What kind of questions? The kind that led to some very difficult conversations. Quaim asked me point blank if you were their father. Omar felt the world tilting around him. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. That you were the man I loved at Cambridge. The man who got me pregnant and then disappeared from our lives because he was too afraid to fight for us. The words hit Omar like a series of physical blows. How did they react? Zara cried. Not because she was sad to learn about you, but because she was angry that I had carried that pain alone for so long. Kemi's voice was steady, but Omar could see the emotion in her eyes. Quaim was quieter. He said he finally understood why I had always been so strong, because I had to be strong enough for all three of us. Double quotes. Omar put his head in his hands. I've destroyed everything. No, Omar, you destroyed us 20 years ago. What happens now depends on what you're willing to do to repair the damage. He looked up at her. What do you mean? Kemi stood and walked to her laptop, pulling up a document. The African expansion project I proposed. It's real. $300 million, 12 countries. Sustainable energy infrastructure that could transform lives for generations. But I want more than just your money. What do you want? I want you to run it. Not from your office in Riyadh, not through conference calls and quarterly reports. I want you to move to Geneva, to work alongside me and the children, to finally be the partner in this vision that you were supposed to be 20 years ago. Omar stared at her, his mind reeling. You want me to leave everything? My family, my company, my life here. I want you to choose, Omar, the same choice you should have made 20 years ago. You can stay here, keep living the life your father designed for you, and watch your children grow up as strangers. Or you can finally have the courage to fight for the family you actually created. The ultimatum hung in the air between them, as stark and impossible as the one he had faced as a 25-year-old student. But this time, Omar realized the stakes were even higher. This wasn't just about choosing between love and duty. It was about choosing between the man he had become and the man he could still be. I need time to think, he said. Kemi nodded. You have 48 hours. After that, I'm taking the project to your competitors in Dubai. And Omar? She met his eyes with an intensity that reminded him of the young woman who had challenged his assumptions in a Cambridge lecture hall. This is the last chance you'll ever get to be their father. Don't waste it. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. 46 hours later, Omar stood on the rooftop terrace of his mansion, watching the sun set over the city he had called home for 45 years. In 2 hours, Kemi's ultimatum would expire. In 2 hours, he would either board a plane to Geneva to claim the family he had abandoned, or watch them disappear from his life forever. The past 46 hours had been the most intense of his adult life. He had barely slept, eaten only when forced to, and found himself unable to focus on anything except the impossible decision that would define the rest of his existence. Yesterday, he had done something unprecedented. He had called an emergency board meeting to discuss stepping down as CEO of Rashid Industries. The reaction had been explosive. You want a what? His brother Tariq had demanded, his voice rising to a level that echoed through the boardroom. Omar, you built this company. You are this company. And I'm proposing to transition leadership while pursuing new opportunities that align with our long-term strategic goals. The other board members had exchanged bewildered glances. Omar's uncle, Rashid al-Mahmoud, had leaned forward with the authority of the family patriarch he had become since Halil's death. Omar, what is really happening here? This sudden interest in African expansion, this talk of relocating operations to Geneva, this isn't like you. Omar had taken a deep breath, knowing that his next words would shatter the carefully constructed image he had maintained for decades. I've been offered a partnership opportunity that would allow us to implement sustainable energy projects across 12 African nations. It's the kind of work I've always dreamed of doing. Dreams? Uncle Rashid's voice had been sharp with disapproval. You're 45 years old, Omar. You have responsibilities, obligations, a family that depends on you. This sounds like a midlife crisis, not a business strategy. Tariq had studied his brother's face with growing understanding. This is about her, isn't it? The investor from Cambridge. The silence that followed had been deafening. Omar had felt the weight of every family expectation, every cultural tradition, every social obligation pressing down on him like a physical force. Her name is Kemi Adebayo, Omar had said quietly. And yes, this is about her. It's about correcting a mistake I made 20 years ago that has haunted me every day since. What kind of mistake? Uncle Rashid's voice had been dangerously low. The kind that cost me the only woman I ever truly loved and the children I should have raised. The explosion that followed had been predictable but devastating. Accusations of betrayal, threats to his inheritance, demands for explanations that Omar couldn't provide without revealing secrets that would destroy multiple families. The meeting had ended with Omar suspended from active duty, pending a psychological evaluation and family intervention. But the confrontation had also brought unexpected clarity. For the first time in 20 years, Omar had spoken his truth aloud. And the weight of that honesty had been both terrifying and liberating. The conversation with his children had been even more difficult. He had gathered Amira, Faisal, and Layla in his study the previous evening, unsure how to explain a situation that defied easy comprehension. I need to tell you something about my past, he had begun, watching their faces carefully. Before I married your mother, when I was studying in England, I was in love with someone else. 15-year-old Amira had frowned. What happened to her? I made a terrible choice. I walked away from her because I was afraid of disappointing my family, of breaking traditions that seemed more important than love. 12-year-old Faisal had leaned forward. But you married Mama instead. Yes, I did. And I want you to know that your mother is a good woman who deserved better than a husband who was never fully present. You three are the greatest blessings of my life. But I've realized that I've been living a lie that has hurt everyone I care about. Layla, at 8 years old, had asked the question that pierced his heart. Baba, are you going to leave us? Omar had knelt down to meet her eyes. I'm going to try to become the kind of father you deserve. The kind who fights for what he believes in, who shows you that love is more important than what other people think. The conversation with Yasmin had been the most surprising of all. She had listened to his full confession about Kemi, about the twins, about the choice he was facing, with a composure that had left him speechless. I've known for years that you never belonged to me completely, she had said when he finished. I married you knowing that our fathers had arranged it, hoping that affection would grow into love. But Omar, you can't love someone fully when part of your heart belongs to someone else. Yasmin, let me finish. Her voice had been steady but not unkind. I've spent 20 years being the perfect wife, raising our children, maintaining our social status. But I've also spent 20 years wondering what it would feel like to be chosen, not assigned. Omar had stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we both deserve a chance at authentic happiness. I won't stand in your way if you choose to go to Geneva. But I won't wait for you to come back either. The maturity and grace of her response had left Omar humbled. Yasmin had every right to rage, to demand he stay, to fight for the life they had built together. Instead, she had chosen to set him free, just as he was finally finding the courage to free himself. Now, Standing on his terrace as the final hours ticked away, Omar felt the weight of 20 years of regret and the terrifying possibility of Omar felt the weight of 20 bukale. Redemption. His phone buzzed with a text from Kemi, Flight 847 to Geneva. Departs at 11 p.m. I've taken the liberty of booking you a seat. The choice is yours. Below the message was a photo that stopped his breath. Zara and Quain stood together at Geneva Airport, holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, Dad." The simple word, Dad, in his daughter's handwriting shattered the last of his resistance. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. They were his children, young adults who had somehow found the grace to offer him a chance at the relationship he had thrown away before they were born. Omar's phone rang. Tariq's name appeared on the screen. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," his brother said without preamble. "About choices and courage and the lives we build versus the lives we're given. Tariq, I've decided to support your decision, whatever it is. The board will fight you, Uncle Rashid will disown you, and half of Riyadh society will whisper about the Rashid family scandal for years. But Omar, I've watched you for 20 years, and I've never seen you as alive as you were when you talked about that woman and those children." Omar felt tears sting his eyes. "Thank you. Just promise me one thing. If you go, don't look back. Don't spend the rest of your life wondering if you made the right choice. Own it completely." An hour later, Omar sat in his study writing 3 letters. The first was to his children with Yasmin, explaining his decision and promising that distance would never diminish his love for them. The second was to the board of Rashid Industries, formally resigning his position and recommending Tariq as his successor. The third was to Kemi, but when he tried to put his feelings into words, language failed him. Instead, he walked to his safe and retrieved the photograph from Cambridge. Kemi laughing, her face bright with joy and possibility. On the back, he wrote a single line, "I should have chosen you the first time. I'm choosing you now." At 10:15 p.m., Omar stood in the foyer of his mansion with a single suitcase, the same way he had left Cambridge 20 years earlier. But this time, he wasn't running from love, he was running toward it. Yasmin appeared at the top of the stairs, elegant in her nightgown, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "Will you be happy?" she asked. Omar considered the question carefully. "I don't know. But for the first time in 20 years, I'll be authentic." She nodded. "That's enough." The drive to the airport felt like a journey through multiple lifetimes. Omar passed the office building where he had built his empire, the mosque where he had prayed for guidance he had been too afraid to follow, the country club where he had played the role of successful businessman while his heart remained frozen. In time. At the airport, he checked in for Flight 847 with hands that shook slightly. The gate agent smiled. "Traveling for business or pleasure, Mr. Rashid?" Omar thought about the question. "I'm going home." On the plane, as Riyadh fell away beneath him, Omar felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 decades, the exhilarating terror of not knowing what came next. He was giving up everything he had spent his adult life building: wealth, status, social position, family approval, for the chance to claim something he had never really had: authentic love and the family it had created. As the plane climbed toward cruising altitude, Omar closed his eyes and imagined Zara and Quaim waiting for him in Geneva. He thought about working alongside Kemi to build the kind of projects they had dreamed of as students. He thought about finally being the kind of father who showed up, who chose his children over his fears, who demonstrated that love was worth fighting for. For the first time in 20 years, Omar Rashid was flying toward his future instead of running from his past. And whatever waited for him in Geneva, forgiveness, redemption, or simply the chance to finally tell his children he loved them, it had to be better than the hollow success he was leaving behind. The boy who had been too afraid to choose love had finally become a man brave enough to choose his family. And as the plane carried him toward the life he should have claimed 2 decades ago, Omar finally understood what Kemi had tried to teach him in that Cambridge lecture hall. Sometimes the most important decision you make is the one you make for love, regardless of the cost. 20 years later, Omar Rashid was finally going home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.